Welcome back to Crit and Crit. I am Axion.
And I'm Scint.
And won't someone please think of the children? I'm sure if you have been involved in almost any kind of public discussion about anything, but particularly involving politics, religion, schooling, or education of any sort, you have heard this particular manifesto and become exceedingly tired of hearing it.
I'm going to put it this way. I'm not sure where the quote originated, but I agree with it. If they made an accurate movie about secondary school students would not be allowed to watch it. Whatever we are trying to protect the children from, usually in the form of, oh, don't read that, don't watch that, most of the time, the children we are meant to be protecting from it have been doing worse.
Yep. And probably up to and including that particular thing.
Don't read this book, there's bad language in it. Have you heard your son? Have you heard your daughter? I just signed 3 detention slips about language today. They're saying worse than what they will find in this book.
In fact, in many cases, these children will look at this thing that you're trying to hide from them and think that whatever you're trying to hide from them is quite quaint.
But yeah, this is relevant for Prisoner of Azkaban because, well, for a good chunk of the book, adults are trying to protect Harry by withholding information from him. Specifically, the fact that an escaped serial killer might be looking for Harry. This kind of seems like the sort of thing you would want to tell someone. Like, because if you tell a student, "Hey, don't leave the grounds after night. Like, don't leave the castle and go wandering around the grounds," you're probably going to get a response of, "You're not my real dad," and they'll go out and wander the grounds because you told them not to. If you tell them, "Don't go outside without supervision, there is a murderer who has been rumored to be looking for you," people will generally take that more seriously. No pun intended. But yeah, we see this as early as the Marge incident when Fudge picks him up and completely glosses over everything. Because the safest place Harry could be is at Hogwarts, so they can't follow through on the whole expulsion thing because they need him to be safe because, let's be honest, he's a very big political symbol. He is their triumph over Voldemort. They can't afford to have him killed. So, yeah, they will absolutely bend the rules for that, but also not explain anything.
Where was that last book?
Well, last book there wasn't a serial killer that was specifically rumored to be looking for Harry because they heard him muttering in his sleep, "He's at Hogwarts, he's at Hogwarts." Which, you know, we later means he saw the newspaper that showed Pettigrew, aka Scabbers, forgot to mention that last time, on Ron's shoulder in that picture of the Weasleys in Egypt, and knew that Pettigrew was at Hogwarts. He recognized him because the rat's paw was missing a finger, which happened to be the finger that Pettigrew cut off to fake his death. So, Mr. Weasley and Mrs. Weasley argue over whether or not to tell Harry that Black is looking for him. Mr. Weasley, thankfully, bucks the trend and tells Harry, "Please be careful, don't go looking for Sirius Black." But they neglect to tell Harry why Black would be looking for him.
Yep. It's just... which leads Harry to make his own conclusions from the bits of information he does know, regardless of how accurate they may or may not be. He knows from listening to people talk and getting bits of rumors and things here and there, that Black was apparently a high-ranking lieutenant of Voldemort, and thus, of course, he'll be searching for Harry, both to get his revenge for his master's death, and to work towards bringing Voldemort back, since it's now known that, at least in certain circles, that that's a thing that Voldemort is trying to do.
Yep. So Harry doesn't agree to not go looking for Black. He's like, yeah, why would I go hunt that down? And then he hears a little bit more of the story, which is that Black also happened to be your godfather and your father's best friend and best man at his wedding, so he's responsible for your parents' death in absolute backstab, which has Harry on the warpath and actively wants to go hunt Black down. Doesn't, but wants to. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Turns out there was some actual good reason to maybe not tell Harry about Sirius Black if that's what was going to happen, which I believe they suspected.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all, given what we've seen of Harry in the past 2 books.
Yeah, Harry has a bit of a hero complex, but that might be standard for Gryffindor.
That reminds me, I do need to go shopping before we move on with the rest of the plot.
So, yeah. After a point, you really have to wonder how much you're actually protecting the children you're thinking of by withholding information and censoring what you can give to them. Like, obviously, there are limits to what you should throw at them. Like, absolutely explicit things are completely out of bounds. Do not do that. But sometimes it's something as simple as, To Kill a Mockingbird, banned in some school districts for use of racist language, when the entire point of the book is calling out racism. So, of course, it's going to use racist language to demonstrate the people you shouldn't sympathize with.
Of course, that's presuming it's not all just a smokescreen for much more unpleasant motives for actually their reasons for banning it.
Yeah. But,
there's not a medicine shop here, it looks like.
So, like, it gets really interesting in terms of the whole protect the children aspect, because we can see that some of the children at Hogwarts are incredibly devious and already willing to do some pretty heinous things. Like, Draco Malfoy is willing to participate in, effectively, insurance fraud to try and get a teacher fired. He spends half the year faking an injury, which mysteriously is healed the instant they lose the trial. But we should protect the children by withholding information so they don't become corrupted and lose their innocence. I don't think there's a whole lot of that at Hogwarts. Not after the petrification incidents of the year before, and just... I'm not sure how you can say you're trying to protect children at Hogwarts by withholding information when you have the murder forest 30 feet from the castle and the staircases keep moving. How many kids do you think have been injured on moving staircases there? There are so many
Hogwarts
things at the school.
Hogwarts would be so OSHA and compliant.
Don't tell Brian David Gilbert. Yeah, but we see this kind of overwhelmingly in a lot of media that involves children. Of, don't tell them, it will only make them upset, even if it's something that they really, really need to know, especially in, like, young adult genres, because, well, how often do you see these books where the kids patiently wait to have the information told to them before they just go out and figure it out anyway, and, you know, telling the kids that there's a monster outside the door would have actually been really helpful, and they might not have gone outside, and maybe one of the kids would have gotten killed. I'm actually not referring to anything specific, I'm kind of just riffing. But,
I was wondering.
But no, it's like, there is a lot of young adult-aimed media where you have this happen, where it's, adults have information, it is not given to the children go out and do children book things, and danger ensues. very bad danger ensues in many cases. If they're not, so it's like I'm not really sure there's any purpose to that point other than to give the adults a false sense of security about the situation. Which actually makes me think of, I believe it was a Maurice Sendak quote. When I was a child, I knew horrible things, but I didn't want the adults to know because it would make them upset. Kids know more than we give them credit for in a lot of cases, so often the only thing we're protecting by thinking of the children and keeping these things out of their innocent eyes is ourselves and our own sense of the status quo.
More or less. And that's admittedly, for a lot of people in Hogwarts, that very much seems to be the intent. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want things to be abnormal. They want everything to just keep going as it was.
They don't want to rock the boat, so let's teach children how to use magic. That's not going to cause any rocking of boats at all.
Well, I mean, that's normal for them.
Yes, but, okay. If I'm in school and I do a bad job in my English class, the worst that happens is I don't speak English very good. If I'm in magic school and I'm really bad at potions, that thing could explode and take out half the room and turn them into pigeons. There are degrees of failure that kind of mean the status quo is a lot more tenuous in a magical world than in ours. And yes, I know chemistry is also a thing, but I've never heard of anybody turning into a pigeon as a result of that.
Just not trying hard enough. Either that or not working with enough plutonium.
You are banned from Chem Lab. But yeah, just think of how well we actually managed to protect children from this horrible, horrible reality. Like, on a more innocuous example, I'm thinking in 7th grade, it was a lot of my classmates were talking about The Matrix, which I should remind everybody is rated R. I was the only person in my class who had not seen it. So how protected are we if a bunch of 12-year-olds are seeing a movie they're too young to see? And everything that goes on in that.
I mean,
so
this is an issue that... I mean, we're obviously gamers to some extent. I wouldn't put us in the gamer culture, because there's a lot of that culture that neither one of us jives with. But we play video games. We do enjoy a lot of what gaming has to offer, and to that point, we keep, to some degree, and attention on what is going on with regards to video games and pop culture. And we also both grew up in the 90s. The era of the hot coffee incident and Jack Thompson and Mortal Kombat getting censored on certain consoles and things like that, where...
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, it took me several seconds to realize that the hot coffee incident was not the McDonald's lawsuit that McDonald's completely spun to look more frivolous than it was. That poor woman.
Yeah. Do you actually know what I was talking about?
Yeah, it took me a second. It's a GTA thing, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have never played Grand Theft Auto, so, I mean, do with that what you will.
I think I played one of the really early 2D ones at some point, but not the one that was involved in the incident. But this was the era when video games were basically on trial. And there were people, most notably and most infamously Jack Thompson, but he was hardly the only one, who were having a vested interest in wanting to make video games more restricted.
It was just the latest scapegoat for bad behavior.
Yeah.
It was metal before that, rap before that. Was it rap or metal? I don't know. It was some music before that. It was TV before that. I can't keep track of all the things that old parents are playing for their kids' poor behavior on.
Of course, there was D&D and the Satanic Panic. back in the 80s.
Yeah, suffice to say, poor parents will always find an excuse that it's not their fault that their children are misbehaving. It's always something in pop culture that they didn't get from me. Like, yes, they did. They absolutely learned their behaviors from watching you. Own it and fix it. I can't tell you how many times I watched my dad play Doom when I was a kid, and I have yet never felt the urge to become a violent psychopath. It's almost like I was actually parented to not do these things, despite the fact that there were violent video games. Wow, concept.
I grew up playing mostly like JRPGs and platformers and things like that, so not what anyone would describe as violent video games. I could name the number of shooters I played as a kid in less than one hand. But I played D&D, and I listened to metal a lot. And I have never once had an urge to do anything more violent than maybe slap somebody across the head, and I've certainly never followed through on such. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, people will always find an excuse. It can't be my fault, I was doing everything right, even when the evidence is absolutely stacked against you, no you didn't. It's got to be something other than me, so therefore, if we protect the children from this thing's horrible influence, we won't have any more of this problem. Except, the problem has existed before most forms of modern media have existed. People have always been willing to, you know, be awful to each other.
Unfortunately.
Yep. And that predates video games, that predates comic books, that predates most movies, that predates most forms of modern music. So, yeah, just think of the children. Look at history. What exactly are we trying to protect them from? Learning? Seeing what the world is? Seeing what they have the potential to become? Seeing how their actions affect other people? What exactly are we thinking of when we're thinking of the children? Because I don't actually think we're thinking of them as much as people say we are.
And as we said earlier, what it comes down to is most of them are thinking of their own comfort, their own convenience, and not wanting to explain things to their kids or discuss things with their kids that they find uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, sounds like a choice you should have made earlier on in your life. If you didn't want the responsibility of answering these questions, why did you choose to become a parent?
And that's kind of a thing that basically gets wrapped up as I had kids because I was supposed to. This is what was expected of me.
So then the explanations were expected of you as well. It's not a buffet. You are a parent if you become a parent. So do it. Raise the kids you want to raise. Raise them responsibly. Raise them with the values you want them to have. But take ownership of your upbringing of them. If you want to raise your kids a certain way, that's on you. To make sure that you do the best you can to impart these lessons and to see the person that your child becomes while following the values you emulate for them. Harry Potter did not have a parent figure to do that. It's amazing he turned out as normal as he did, considering the examples he had and the complete utter lack of support or parenting he had as a child. So, yeah.
And we kind of went way off the rails there. A lot of that conversation was not necessarily about Harry Potter specifically, even though it was to some degree applicable. We certainly wouldn't have completely wasted time if this had absolutely no connection to Harry Potter, even though we did have a tendency to ramble a bit. But I think we've kind of run this well dry, and I am completely uncertain where I'm supposed to be going. I thought I knew where I was supposed to go, and I played out the cutscene that I was there, but I do not know where I'm supposed to go next. So, since we're pretty much wrapped up here, I think this is a good place to stop this episode, and next time we will know where it is we're actually supposed to go.
Alrighty, until then.
See y'all next time.